So my name is Raphael. I'm from Steelcase, not from the US, but from Munich. I joined the company in 2011 as an eco-design expert, working alongside the product development teams on design for the environment. And recently I moved into a new role to support the transition towards a circular economy, and that's why I'm here today to talk with you about that journey that we've engaged. I'll tell you a little more about Steelcase and also where we are coming from, but this is to better introduce where we are going and the approach that we're engaging today. Quickly about Steelcase, it's a 1912 founded company in North America, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're an inside-led company, so design thinking is one of the principles that we apply for our product development. We have a global reach. We have about 15 manufacturing sites around the world. And our purpose is to unlock human promise. We create experiences where people go to work. It's about improving the well-being, improving the human interaction, and fostering the innovation at the workplace. We also are active in the healthcare and education segments. People are at the heart of what we do. We're a human-centered company, so building on the design thinking philosophy. And it's about creating the economic, environmental, and social conditions to allow the people to thrive. What we do, and very quickly, it's about creating those workplaces with a palette of places. We have one of the broadest portfolios of solutions in the market segment, and we help explore, plan, and provide. This is just a highlight of some of the products from Steelcase. It's a great variety of products. It's a great variety of materials. It embeds more and more technology. And as we know, products are the engine of the circular economy. So I'll be talking a little bit about the foundation, which was very much focused on the products and enterprise optimization. For more than 2 decades, it's been about product design and product performance. We've been leading the way in closed-loop design, and this is one of our think chairs that was first brought to the market in 2004 in its first version, designed for disassembly. Our product development is focused around 3 pillars: materials chemistry, life cycle thinking and LCA, and recycle and reuse. Very briefly, materials chemistry inspired by the C2C philosophy about healthy materials for safe and continuous cycles. What it means to us, it's about assessing the materials down to the 100 parts per million against 24 human and environmental health criteria. And the think chair back in 2004 was actually the first one to be C2C certified. Life cycle thinking and LCA, about identifying the opportunities along the life cycle. So not just thinking about our own operations, but also the entire life cycle of the products. And so for us, it's about integrating that approach into the product development process. It's about continuous LCA calculations to guide decision making. And it's also about communicating the results. On reuse and recycle, building products inspired by a closed loop. It's about preferred recycled and recyclable materials. It's about rapid and easy disassembly of materials. And it's also about guiding that material recovery, for instance, with disassembly instructions. And this is another example of a product that lets itself disassemble very easily. So in the past 2 decades, it's been really about business model optimization. It's been about that product excellence, which I just showcased, also about footprint reductions and social investment. And so for us, it's been about from the materials to the installation. We've been living here, and we've been improving or optimizing the processes here. Now, obviously, we continue to advance our practice around the products. We continue to pursue dialogue with suppliers and recyclers. We explore circular indicators for product development. We contribute to the social LCA movement, and we've also been working on uncovering biomimicry-inspired solutions. We're fostering material innovation. So still around the products. But concurrently, and for more than a decade now, we've also been expanding our know-how on the day 2 services and share models. So for Steelcase, it has been about mainly 2 services: eco services, which is our take-back program, which enables to go to the customer and help him with the furniture that is no longer in need, to find the appropriate new market, be it through reuse, charitable donations, or recycling if it's no longer usable. And Workspring, which is inspired by the sharing economy, which allows people to go work there if they don't own assets or workplace. So for the past decade, it's been also about exploring some business model concepts inspired by the circular economy around this product-service integration, around the share models. And so we've started to go after the installation phase where the customer lives by creating some experiences and touch points with the customer. We've also partnered with some experts in the circular economy field. We're part of the C100, for instance, of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which enables us to grow our knowledge in circular economy, as well as with the sensors that I will mention in the presentation today. But let's just take a quick look back at the definition that we already saw in the presentation from Nancy before, from the circular economy. Being restorative and regenerative by design. This is something that we have approached with what we have been doing around the products, but there's surely more to do. And keeping the products, components, and materials at the highest utility and value at all times. This is also something that we've started to tackle, but there's surely also more to do. And this is what I'm going to be talking about now. For us, it's been really about unfolding the opportunities on what we call the dark side of the moon. So again, where the customer lives. And the question that we ask ourselves is, how can we build on this foundation to guide the business choices that we make today, to accelerate the transition to a circular economy and unfold its full potential. So with circular economy as our guiding framework, we're taking on a new approach. We're shifting roles and shifting conversations, and that should speak to the sustainability leaders in the different organizations, where at the beginning the dialogue was about the operational performance. It was about advocating, and your key partners might have been operations. It went to the product, looking at the performance, where you've been consulting and engaging more with the product development teams. We've been more and more looking and being strategists, looking at the enterprise performance, working with across the different corporate functions in the company. But more and more, we're being entrepreneurs. We mentioned startups before, and we're really looking at new business models. We're starting to cooperate with new business innovation departments in the company, with the C-suite, because this is something that touches them directly and talks to them. So it's not only about shifting the dialogue, it's also about shifting the mindsets. Just a quick list. From product development integration to really embodied innovation, from product level innovation to systems level innovation, from the corporate initiatives to the new business models. It's really about being a champion to becoming a business partner as a sustainability leaders in the organizations. And most importantly, it's about shifting our focus from the enterprise optimization to the business model transformation. We know that this is the future, and to approach this, this is a short list. We're investing in C-oriented research. We're conducting assessments to help drive a roadmap. We're piloting and refining business cases, exploring the viability of them. We're engaging differently with stakeholders. I said that the dialogue is different, is also with different partners. And this change comes with fundamental questions to consider. How does this conversation shift from business optimization to business transformation? How do we unleash the culture of innovation to drive circular products and business models? How do we take sustainable design platforms to a new level? How can we drive new value creations through technology? To guide our approach, we've engaged in two complementary exercises. At Steelcase, we have a sustainability steering committee composed of several disciplines across the company. And they've been sponsoring two exercises, a sustainability materiality assessment, which some of you might know, and a sustainability maturity assessment, which we will learn more today in our workshop with our colleagues from Essensis. All of this to help us shape the vision and the roadmap for accelerating the transition. The sustainability materiality assessment is really about understanding what is material to Steelcase and its stakeholders. So it's really about mapping the sustainability issues that impact Steelcase business, but also influence the stakeholder decision-making. Some category examples would be diversity and inclusion, energy and emissions, but also more related to circular economy, sustainable design, end of use, and waste. So those are issues that are material to Steelcase. The maturity assessment, I would say, is in two main phases. The first one for us was to diagnose the levels of integration of sustainability practices throughout the company. Processes, so Essensis will share more of this during the workshop today. There are 77 management practices against which Steelcase has been assessed to understand what is our capability level today. It can go from incomplete to formalized to improved. I will tell more in a second to why we did this exercise. The category examples would be, for instance, environmental product strategy, product system offerings, monitoring use and end of life, people engagement, supply qualification. In the second phase, we're looking at defining a vision with the different stakeholders that are involved in the company, and we help create a roadmap. For Steelcase, we've articulated this roadmap around three main pillars. The first one being around new business innovation, so really continuing to develop new business models, to prototype, to pilot them, but also to collect that new market intelligence that feeds those solutions. To advance the business excellence, also linked to the product excellence that I was referring to before. So really aligning the strategy with the vision, and also understanding what it means for the product development process, for instance, and engaging with customers, something that I will come back to later as well. And the third pillar is around the business foundation, which is around the knowledge and competence that we have to develop across the company, as well as that stakeholder engagement that is needed. So those two exercises really helped us evaluate our strengths and gaps, to socialize the results across the company. It's been also about creating collectively a vision for what we want to achieve, and making sure that it's aligned with the greater purpose and material issues to Steelcase. It's been about setting a basis for the strategy goals, and understand how they feed one another. How does market intelligence feed the new business model development and the strategy of the company, and so on. To engage more easily with the stakeholders thanks to a common language, a common exercise that we went through together. And where we are right now is developing an action plan with the aim to monitor progress. So this is where we are today. Circular economy is full of promises that we already live today. I mentioned new business development and new business innovation. This is really something that is critical. We really need to embrace it for real change and to really bring new innovation. As of today, we're obviously exploring the different business model opportunities that the sea can offer, be it along remanufacturing, being along different ownership models, etc. But what we really notice is that it also requires a shift in our approach to evaluating risks and profit, for instance. The promise of a designing for circularity, it's really about embracing new design sensibilities. The discussion and the choices that we make are not the same for designing for disassembly versus designing for long life, for sharing, for modularity, repair, refurbishing, reassembling, remanufacturing. It's different competencies, it's different know-how that is needed, it's different choices that need to be made. All of this obviously needs to be supported by circular systems. The promise of the Internet of Things, we mentioned technology. We know that technology is going to be more and more embedded into our products and that the connectivity is going to be key to make those circular systems work. For us, it would mean, for instance, that we will be able to capture information such as on use patterns, performance patterns, location and availability, the provenance of the chair, so what's its history, specifications, product material value information. All of this will be enabled by technology and will create smarter circular systems. The promise of design thinking, I was mentioning that Steelcase was a human-centered enterprise. We really need to embrace human-centered service design. It's not just about creating the processes, it's also creating solutions that work and that users or customers will use. So those are, for instance, pictures of some of our workshops to create a greater experience around our take-back program and to improve our reverse logistics systems. And the promise of co-creating with customers, because what we're really seeing is that as we're going from products to smart connected environments and services, from products to performance, we're also shifting from a transaction to a relationship. So in conclusion, for Steelcase, the circular economy aspirations require a new approach. I was mentioning that we were focusing at the beginning on the product excellence and really here from the materials to the installation. That we were starting to explore business concepts and creating experiences here on the dark side of the moon. But for us, the circular economy means really recreating what we already do today, thinking about it differently, embrace the change, and also reinvent where the customer lives. Our ability to accelerate the transition will require us to continue taking CE as a lens for innovation, especially around business model innovation, to continue building on a supportive organizational and innovation culture, to develop adequate business foundation across the company, to find and empower the key stakeholders and innovators across the company, to demystify and change our approach to risk and return on investment, to continue engaging in strategic partnerships. There's many circular economy experts out there. To run pilots, to help people envision on the one hand, but also on the other hand to uncover issues and opportunities. To leverage the promise of the Internet of Things, to continue living the design thinking promise, and to co-create with the customers. So Steelcase has been able to anticipate and adapt over the last 100 years. We're now more than 100 years old. And to us, circular economy is really about thinking in terms of complex, adaptive systems. We know that it's going to be fueled by technology and that this framework will guide us through the next 100 years. That is at least the aspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael. Very nice presentation. Any questions for Raphael? Question?
Hey, nice presentation. Thank you. Christian, DTU student. I really like the two-step process of materiality assessment and maturity assessment. I was wondering, you were quite quickly to go across the first step, materiality assessment. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that, according to the stakeholders, how you assess the materiality across the stakeholder grid. You had a nice slide about it, but I didn't quite catch the graph of it.
The graph?
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't take me too much time to go back.
There we go.
So this is based on a series of interviews with the different stakeholders of the company. And it's a general practice exercise that large companies are engaging. And you are basically mapping what is really material to Steelcase from an environmental, social, and governance issue standpoint. It's really about, so for us, for instance, we are in the technical cycle more than in the biological cycle. We're less dealing with natural materials, even if we have more and more of them in our products. We don't have a large land footprint. So for instance, biodiversity might be something that might live in the lower sphere here of influence on the stakeholder decision and impact on the Steelcase business. While up here, you might see categories such as employee well-being, yeah, for instance.
Okay, thanks.
What this really enabled us to do was to understand, when we looked at the roadmap that we wanted to create, based on the maturity work that we did, was to give a sense of priority to where we should invest first and where we should invest second. You can't do everything at once, and this materiality assessment helped us prioritize, let's say, where we engage first into our next steps. This was one of the main exercises.
Okay, question from Detlef.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with us these insights. It seems that Steelcase is working on many different levels, so both material on a strategic level and so on. Where is this transformation kind of anchored? What's your evaluation? Is that basically because it's in the DNA of the company, or is it a few souls that drive this forward? How is that working? Because I see that changing that from return on investment and risk, I mean, I guess most companies, I could name one I work for maybe, it's very hard to change that mindset of saying, if we invest something, we need to get something out of it in terms of economy or money.
No, you're absolutely right.
And this is risk, right?
It doesn't happen from one day to another, and as of today, where it starts is it's part of the DNA in the sense that we already have this foundation. We've been always trying to be ahead in terms of designing products for the environment. And we want to continue building on that legacy. So we have already sponsors in the company, let's say, that believe in that what we are doing is right for the company. We're seeing more and more momentum across the leadership board, asking questions. Our CEO was recently at another conference in North America where he spoke himself to his own initiative about circular economy. So it does take, obviously, the sponsorship of some leaders to really help drive the effort, but it is both a top-down and a bottom-down effort. The bottom-down effort obviously started very early, started with different approaches, but we know that we have something to build on, and we understand that to be relevant tomorrow, we need to approach the change. Now, the change about approaching the risks and the return or the profits questions, that is something that takes more than a simple one-hour meeting. That is a long engagement, but it's about creating that knowledge for the leaders. For instance, there are some groups that are looking into accounting for circular economy, and it is important that the people that represent the ones that make those decisions in the company, are getting informed about new ways to approach risk calculation, for instance. So it's an engagement, it's a journey, it's part of the dialogue that you need to engage with the right stakeholders. You need to find the right moment too. There are moments where it's just not the right moment. But as you said, there are so many initiatives to start, so we need to prioritize on where we put our efforts first, and we hope that it's all going to come together, obviously.
Thank you for your presentation. It's always interesting to see some new cases, especially when they are specific. I'm wondering. It seems that you have made a very clear strategical choice that you want to go the path for circular economy, and you have decided all the right steps for that. This count on the branding side for sure, but to convince the CEO, I guess there might be some economical figures also. Could you maybe give us a brief on what is the benefit from an economical point of view by doing this? Does it improve the revenue on the product? Does it expand the market share? Does it whatever? Have you any monitoring ideas on that at the moment?
Well, we've been engaging those discussions and trying to understand what are the value opportunities and what will be the, let's say, return on investment of making the shift, yes. I would say, for instance, one thing, we talked about designing services and experiences, it's shifting from the products, and there is a nice graph called the progression of economic value that would tell you that if you continue just selling products, with everyone selling products, your product is being commoditized, and the way to add value is by customizing and creating services, and this is where you'll make more money, let's say. And then if you, on top of that, create an experience to differentiate yourself, you create, again, value that the customers would be ready to pay for. So there is a benefit to changing the approach away from products that are being commoditized to services, to experiences. A lot of it is unanswered today, for instance, on some of the discussions or explorations that we're having around the new business models. It's part of the exploration that we're doing, so it's part of understanding where the revenue comes from. But it's not a simple answer. If you go down to the single products and try to understand the viability of remanufacturing that chair versus that table, it comes down to the decisions that you made earlier for those products, and trying to understand how you're going to be able to optimize that over the next years. And it can become very granular, so we're trying to tackle both the big opportunity, the top-line revenue increase by understanding what the circular economy promise offers, and also at the granular level, now that we're going into the different business models and understanding what they could improve, we're looking more granularly at those revenue opportunities. I don't have specific numbers.
Thank you. Mette Poulsen, representing Grundfos, a Danish-based company. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the specific business model you go to market with, and also how far you are in that process? And also actually how well they are received among your customers?
I would say that for us, even if we've been running for about 8 years now our Take-Back program, it is still a startup. It only is available in a few countries and not in all the countries. We're able to cope with the demand from the customers, but our reverse logistics system is not yet in place, for instance, fully at a global level. And so what we're trying to work on is scaling that business model, for instance, because without that enabling capability, you're not able to get the benefits from all the other business models. So for us, it already starts there. Even if we have that competency in place and in the company, it doesn't live across the entire world. So it already starts there with that enabling company. Where we are now is that we have a full support. It's a matter of scaling the capability. Now, if you look at the other business models, so if you took remanufacturing, for instance, this is still in the early stages. As I said, it can become very detailed in some cases. We really try to understand what is our best case scenario and worst case scenario to really have a business case that is solid to be presented to the leadership. So they know that we're working on it. We have the financial resources and the people resources supporting that work. So that's where our level of maturity is. Now to say that we're going to do remanufacturing tomorrow, I will say that will take a little bit more time. So that's where our maturity is today. It's really still about scaling that enabling capability that is our take-back program, and then building on top those business models such as remanufacturing or different models of ownership, which we're still building the business case for.
Hi, Phil Brown, TU Delft. Thank you very much for the presentation. You had a question over the other side of the room about mindsets within the organization, and you're talking about balancing up many different types of design strategies, which all have positives and negatives. And you were looking at the materials that you're bringing in. This means that you need to work very closely with your suppliers and with the wider network, both forward and reverse logistics. Have you gone through processes of changing or looking at working with mindset shifts within your suppliers? Is there any pushback from your suppliers or the reverse logistic partners? How do you actually start to balance these different strategies within any of the different business models or from a wider strategy point of view?
Well, working with the suppliers, I would say that we already had successful examples on the materials chemistry aspects, for instance, where we were trying to understand what are the chemicals in those materials, the substances, and trying to work with them to eliminate them. I would say that in general there hasn't been pushback. They are able to understand the value that is there for them as well. Now I don't have another specific example.
What's the value that they see intrinsic in this? I'm talking, your suppliers and materials and the different product components, but also reverse logistics partners. You're trying to develop this. Are they all working together with you on it, or are you leading it and they're following?
It's both ways. It depends on the cases. The best examples I have is about eliminating those chemical substances of concern, and suppliers are generally proactive and their ambitions can be different. It can be about market positioning, it can be about anticipating legislation, it can be about just wanting to continue the relationship with us and to also then be a great example for their market out there. So I would say that the motivations vary.
Walter Loll Consult. Thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned several times that you have a new approach or a new concept of risk analysis or risk evaluation. Now, if we define risk as probability times consequence, are you accepting more risk, more probabilities? Are you looking at different consequences? What is new in your approach to risk?
The change that I was referring to is just a definition of the risk and going away from something that can be a payback over X number of years and just taking that approach differently. Because if I look at my profit and loss and the way I'm always looking at my list price, my discount, my cost of goods sold, my OPEX, my CAPEX, my taxes, and then I have my revenue, this is only considering the product with one life cycle. So if I take my assumptions about the risk that I'm taking to get to the percentage of final revenue that I want, it's not considering the different cycles, the take back, and so it's that definition that needs to change so that we can understand that the revenue, the bottom line revenue, is not building on that one life cycle, but actually building on several ones. And this is the shift that needs to change.
Which means your time scale is different.
For instance.
That's a major change. Okay, thank you.
Hi. usually when you make something new, a new product or something like that, you just make it and then you go to your users and you test it. And that's fairly simple, but this is something completely different because it's a whole system that you're actually changing. So you can't really prototype the system and test it before you implement it. Like, how do you go about verifying it before actually implementing it? Do you have any like certain steps?
There are a lot of customers out there that are already ready for the change. A lot of the customer inquiries that we get already today are saying we don't want to own the furniture, for instance. So we're piloting it in real life, let's say. It's happening.
Okay, and it's usually with good results.
It's a journey. We're learning from it. We don't have all the capabilities in place to fully support it. We don't have the full system in place. And if I look beyond our own boundaries, if I go to a recycling site and see how we are recycling chairs or how they even get there, you'd be surprised how the system is not ready yet, but obviously we're just maturing step by step. And I was mentioning the co-creation with the customers. It is very important. But a lot has to change, and we were talking about risks. For instance, if I take the public procurement sector, which I think represents 25% of the GDP in Europe, they have rules guiding them in the way they buy the furniture. So if you come in and you want to sell performance, they don't have the structures for it. So there are some that are ready, some that are asking for it, and there are some that are also still blocked by the bureaucracy and the rules that exist. There's different levels of maturity, and obviously we're piloting it with the ones that are ready for it. I could also mention the technology, for instance. It's also being piloted with customers that have our own products, and they're very happy because they can see sometimes benefit for themselves. If they have a better understanding of how their assets are used, and if they are underused, then they see a benefit for themselves as well. So they welcome this participation and this improvement in our approach with them.
A question here to Cesar.
Cesar França, Black Institute of Technology. You mentioned human-centered service design. So my question is, do you use any specific approach to understand human needs from a circular economy perspective or sustainability perspective?
Yeah. It is part of the DNA of the company to go and observe the workplaces, for instance. And in the case of our reverse logistics system or our take-back program, it was really about understanding the needs of the customer, but also the ones of the partners, because we have partners in that endeavor, in that capability. And so we went out there, we filmed it, we observed it, we interviewed. So it is critical to embed that. As I was saying before, just creating the process might fail. You also need to bring that human aspect so that people are involved. There are several options to dispose of your furniture. You can just go to a simple mover. You can just hire someone from the neighborhood. There's many, many options. But to have the ones that are sustainable, to have the ones that speak to the people and the ones that are really responding to their needs, you need to talk to them, you need to observe, and you need to create the solutions that fit their needs. So yes, we are doing it.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Many, many thanks, Raphael, for a very nice introduction to your journey towards circular economy. Thank you.